for 2021. Natalia, Betsy, and I are pleased and excited that you can join us on this last Sunday, the last day of Black History Month. These words from Ida B. Wells encourage our continuing crusade for justice. In her autobiography, which I hold in my hand, she writes eloquently about equity and justice, and I quote, "When the train started and the conductor came along to collect tickets, he took my ticket, then handed it back to me and told me that he couldn't take my ticket there. I thought that if he didn't want the ticket, I wouldn't bother about it, and so went on reading. In a little while, when he finished taking tickets, he came back and told me I would have to go in the other car. Excuse me. I refused, saying that the forward car was a smoker. And as I was in the lady's car, I proposed to stay. He tried to drag me out of the seat, but the moment he caught hold of my arm, I fastened my teeth in the back of his hand. I had braced my feet against the seat in front and was holding to the back. And as he had already been badly bitten, he didn't try it again by himself. He went forward and got the baggage man and another man to help him, and of course, they succeeded in dragging me out. They were encouraged to do this by the attitude of the white ladies and gentlemen in the car. Some of them even stood on the seats so they could get a good view and continued applauding the conductor for his brave stand." What book were you reading? We ask you. What book were you reading a year ago around this time when the pandemic broke out? It's important that we remember. What were you doing on this day, this week in 2020? Who did you spend time with for a meal, a drink, and conversation? Does any personal moment stay true? We remain steadfast in this tragedy all year, fighting falsehoods and racism, never giving up. And as writers seeking a new page, a new chapter, a new poem. So it means a lot to us at Sunday Salon that you are here to share this precious time together. Thank you. Today, we welcome fiction author Rachel Swearingen and poets Gabriella Fee, Dora Malech, and John McCarthy for what promises to be a memorable evening. The reading order will be as follows. Gabriella will kick off the evening, followed by Dora Malech, after which Gabriella and Dora will read a translation they worked on together. Then Rachel will read from a short story collection. And John McCarthy will close the evening with his new poetry. After the readings, we hope you will stay for a Q&A session with the authors. Okay, so let's get started. We ask that you please mute your audio during the readings, and this is important. Our first reader is Gabriella Fee. Gabriella is a poetry MFA candidate in the Writers' Seminars at Johns Hopkins University and a graduate of Wellesley College. Her work appears in the Wellesley Review, Levy Magazine, and the American Literary Review, where it also won the 2019 Annual Award for Poetry. Please welcome Gabriella Fee.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to start with a poem called The Rock Close. Because my official stance is cool reserve, not just with Lily and Julie and Sarah and Joe, but with my own mother, who winces at my God no, never. I must account privately for the nature of my prayer in the rock close at Blarney Castle Gardens, where, full of a child's hope after arching unassisted to kiss the stone, I found the wishing steps. A set of stairs built, the plaque insists, on an ancient pagan settlement, whose sole surviving tenant is a witch with the power to grant, within a year, the heart's desire of anyone who walks up and down the weathered stone with eyes closed, repeating aloud for the duration of the climb, whatever it is they want most. As with birthday candles, there is a moment of suspense in which one feels the burden of what one ought to say. Nuclear disarmament, wetland conservation, then the shame of choosing something else. The limestone steps were slick, traffic worn, and though I kept my eyes shut the whole time and was alone in Ireland, I made my wish in silence, in my head. Lily and Julie and Sarah and Joe. One by one, my friends are getting married, pregnant. If they recall their old disdain for breeders, as we called rich wives with jogging strollers whose babies we played with to pay for our books, they don't mention it. The gowns are beautiful. The bars open. Sarah breaks a glass with her suede heel. Joe breaks in a name. I don't blame them for wanting what they didn't want a year ago or 10. I imagine them easing into their lives, shared beds. They say they've stopped writing poems. My friends' days are stones in the relic I'll inhabit. One day children will walk up and down, down and up, coaxing their futures from the druid ruin of my open mouth. I'm going to read a couple of poems from this series that I'm working on called A Lighthouse Keeper Considers. And each poem is from the perspective of a lighthouse keeper considering some element in her relatively solitary existence. And the first poem is called A Lighthouse Keeper Considers Her Solitude. When I was young, I searched my body for the truth about me. Now my body begins to slide off the top of me, to rise to the top of me and slide away like congealed fat. My bed is in the kitchen, my duvet red. The moon shines on a halved potato until the potato resembles a weak moon. Undressed, I resemble a woman carved into the prow of a ship, roughly hewn, featureless, so as not to frighten the living or the dead, shouldered nightly into the sea. I crest, I break with no beam cast over me. I am a medallion rubbed down by constant touching. It isn't that the body lies, just that it moves in its own cross-current away from the truth the spirit tells. And why must I represent myself? The worn bodies of objects are freely used and loved. What do the walls of the tower reveal about its double helix stair, its gull feather and scat and arbored kelp? Doesn't the oil lamp stutter? Doesn't the signal light cataract with soot when I shirk the climb? The dog tongues sand from his webbed feet, slavering and stinking of mackerel. I'll go up to the wind. I'll stand in the caressing wind and see if anyone comes. This next poem is called A Lighthouse Keeper Considers Love. She came neither by schooner nor skiff, neither by sea nor brackish channel, neither by south nor east nor west. And if she came by north, I saw nothing of her arrival, standing as I do with the ice sheet at my back. She said neither please nor thank you. She had neither suitcase nor hat. When I gave her the choice of spare bedrooms, she took neither yellow nor red. She was neither tired nor wakeful, spoke neither kind words nor cruel. When I set her a place at my table, she took neither chair nor stool. She was neither pale nor dark-haired, neither fat nor thin. Evenings, I ran her a bath. She neither got out nor stayed in. She could neither dive to an oyster bed, nor sail to town for new oil, nor pull hard on a fishing line, nor tell humpback from right whale. She was neither a wit nor a reader. She could neither weed nor sow. When she sat in the garden while I pulled potatoes, one after another from a rocky furrow, she sang neither fast nor slow. This next poem is called New Year's Eve. The sun butters the hill at 3 o'clock. The day a thin white blade, and this its fullest hour. I fall in love each time the door to Darwin's rings. This woman in silk, that in a felt cap. Winter warms and numbs as well as love. But with the year's last day in quick descent, I feel the pleasure of my oneness spent. In my photograph of you, you grin like a cathedral at the lens. Black and white, elbow cocked, blazer short at the wrist. You lean against a crumbling country wall. I know you by your Georgian stance, your hair abrupt, tall and cool as a manor house, all windows and long halls. Every Cambridge boy has the same shot taken when he graduates in May. Lazy, windswept, shoulders broad, smutty as Achilles on a terracotta vase. I don't know what you play, but captain of the team, your cock is taut against your trousers' checkered seam. It depresses me. You shuttle in and out of time like a sculler on the loom of the river. I can't follow any more than the cold can break, trapped in an old romance of new snow. Something inner binds me to the mast, my letterhead, my sealing wax melting in a spoon. Each day I rise in the same body, dogmatic as the moon. Another year bobs to the surface and breathes, barnacled and scarred by the propeller of the old. The city, lit with industry and dirt, continues in the estuaries of state. My coffee cools. I read a poem on the origins of war. This year, I hope to do away with longing, which has become a standard Christmas chore. Each new year, the beloved river cracks. Last night, winding home on Storrow with our friends packed in the car, your plain hand so near mine as you refreshed the map's bright square, the Charles coyly stretched and under bridges whirled. The left bank, a loosening string of garnets, the right, a tightening string of pearls. This next piece is called Blue and Gold. My mother lays a hand on my shaved head as if I were a figure in a shrine. The heater's on, full blast. This afternoon in the parked Avalon, we've talked epidurals, Lexapro, integrity of the poetic line, while the sun drops over Walden Pond. 3 bundled men have cut a hole to fish. Through the amnion, she says, a sadness may have passed from her to me. Their navy jackets darken, indistinct from ice that looks applied by palette knife. Its scalloped edges flare. The secret locals know is spring's already here, though snow will fall through March. The change is in the light. It's blue and gold, burnished, if not warm. From some opening in our own thinning ice, my mother pulls a jumping line. Now, levity, she says, and starts the car, lifts her right hand off my head to take the wheel. It's too dark now to know for sure if this blessing's asked for or conferred. The last poem I'll read is called Sonogram. Say I put mouth to eye to ear, tell eye a picture, show ear a story, so bright it blinks. Say, I see in sound what you someday will be. Say I wave in sound wave as a hand drags through still water. Hello, little song, glad to hear you. The case of bulbs your mom brought back from Blumenmarkt fares not so well as you. She must have mulched this time, tulip. You, her one green thumb, know her as I can never, though I pull the hair from her brush, free her feet from tangled blankets, read her paper on Lacan. In the field of the unconscious, an ear's the only orifice that cannot close. I know her as one knows an asterism, a 3-star synecdoche. Starling, we make a sweet triangle, though you in instar are unmine. You'll love her as I do, and she you. Thank you.
Very nice.
So, Gabriella, thank you so much for being with us. That was beautiful, just beautiful. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Dora Malech. And so Dora is the author of the poetry collectors, the poetry collections, Flourish, Carnegie Mellon University Press 2020. So that was just last year. So if you can check out the book and buy it, I think it would really help. A lot of writers were not able to make the tours that they were supposed to last year. And then she also has wrote Stutz, Say So, and Shore Ordered Ocean. And the Eris Press published the Eris Press published in the UK, published Soundings, a selected volume of poems and artwork. And Tupelo Press published a chapbook of her poetry titled Time Trine in 4 Quartets, Poetry in the Pandemic in 2020. She has been the recipient of honors that include an Amy Clampett Residency Award, a Mary Sawyer's Baker Prize, a Ruth Lilly Poetry Fellowship, and a Writing Fellowship from the Civitella Ranieri Foundation. She lives in Baltimore, Maryland, where she is on the faculty of the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University. Dora, welcome. So great to have you. And it's all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This is just wonderful to be here. Thank you, Gabriella, for that beautiful reading. That was just stunning. I'm going to start by reading one poem from Flourish, which is right here. And Betsy was kind enough to put a link into the chat, so you can find that here. The poem I'll read from this book, which came out last year, is called For Eliza. The succulents you plucked for me from the abundance of your yard and nested in a blue butter cookie tin with shells and stones for me to take home across time zones, coast to coast, not only rooted in their indoor plot of terracotta here in Baltimore, but thrive so wildly, I have to cut them back. And even then, new white pink roots and fat green baby fingers pull themselves up and out to propagate from the now calloused ends of once raw leaves and stems, which is to say, thank you. I have tried to let this growth exist a welcome fact without forcing it back at you as figure of, though you thrive riven too. I have watched you dive through waves to disappear and then emerge out past the breaking with a smile, and your hair entangles. And even this image of your actual figure need not stand as figure either, just exist in fact of memory, as do the grains of sand and bonfire smoke still clinging to my clothes when I unpack. I have smoothed plaster onto your pregnant belly and watched as it set to hold your shape the week before your first daughter entered the world through you. You know all this already, but a litany of remember when is the closest that I can approach to prayer or spell, as if words could conjure your mother or husband alive again with you. We say lifelong to mean always, but both shift like shorelines. I used to believe in believing and thought that if life hurt, it meant to trust that it was working, like rubbing alcohol and all strong medicine. That was before I knew you or anything. In the past's present, you are making a mobile of driftwood. Long after your daughters look through its slow turning, the shadows it throws still make sense of a relationship with light. And I'd like to read, Natalia also mentioned this chapbook. It's kind of funny because we think of a chapbook as like a little thin book, and it's in this big hefty book because it's an anthology of a bunch of different chapbooks put together that were all written over the past year during the pandemic. So they all in some way address or grapple with or just come out of this time. And in terms of the narrative, this was this strange period of time for all of us, and for me, it was marked by the kind of national and political things that it was marked by for everyone, and then more privately, it was marked by a pregnancy and then a miscarriage, and so those two kind of tangle together in here a little bit. And I'll read this poem. This is basically written about like this weekend last year. It's called Tried. Tried on the floor before a party at which no one thought much about shared air, the virus still elsewhere, or we thought the virus still a far fear, and my body telling me it was time to try. I won't go into detail. A certain detail was my body telling me to try, and the calendar agreed. We call it a window. Let's try in the window as if it's public work. Spectacle, like we have a show to show for our efforts or wares to display. Funny to think of Februaries as the year's last parties. Leap, we say, as if we're trying to urge it all over. All evening I drank fizzy water and tried to believe in cells, like those bubbles, something going, are you trying? Are you trying? Are you trying? Right inside of me. And beyond lay the lie lodged deep in believe, and the sting of a thing that could be. History. I felt I carried something in me and cared for it accordingly with vitamins and pride. I won't say what I named it, but I named it out loud. Then no heartbeat. Whatever it was wasn't and never was. Don't look at me with pity. You know, you've known its name and how it feels to hold inside you and believe it to be good and growing, only to learn that it was nothing all along. Nothing, but much bloodier. Iris Park. How many times have I typed dead for deer this spring? Enough. My loss less art than craft this spring, a name spelled out in uncooked noodles and glue pitched in the kitchen trash, construction paper steeped in dregs, bent corner dabbing at potatoes' eyes, ripped edge wicking the last juice from a brown core. Outside, rain is pestering the little leaves again and flooding the road my mind drives back north to the hospital, where each precast concrete parking structure is named after a flower. This poem is called After Us. So it's after a poem called After Us. And it's by the Macedonian poet Nikola Mazurov. And the quote from his poem at the beginning is, "Others' pity will set out after us like the moon after some wandering child." It's a lovely poem. He's a lovely poet. And he had written to me toward the beginning of the pandemic, and as I'm sure some of you have been, many dropped balls in the past year, and so I didn't write back for a long time. And when enough time went on that I felt like I needed a bigger gesture than just an email, so I wrote this poem, which has taken on a strange sort of resonance for me afterward, because he actually, he got COVID in December, and was hospitalized on a ventilator for a long time. And he's home now, but it's a long road. So a poem that I wrote, I think maybe looking to him for some solace, kind of flipped around for me. After Us. Nicola, I owe you a note. So many one days in a row for so many. To answer finally, I am as fine as anyone could hope to be within a system's spinning. I spent a season and another watching. The neighbor's shows through her window, the cases climbing, red bolts of data and the rumble that follows, dissonant chord of lies and prayers. My mouth. Held tongue chafes, no balm but these same seasons, embraceless despite the overarmed police. You begin to end in a last kind wish for me and mine. I do hope. And from afar, I borrow a bit of what I need, as any neighbor might, with thanks. Dear Nicola, I do hope too. I think I'll just read a new poem or two. Let me just pull this up here. 1 second. Actually, I think I'll read one more, and then Gabriella is actually going to come back. We've been working on some translations together, which has been an absolute pleasure, and I want to make sure we give the poems that we're going to read a little bit of time. So thank you again for listening. And this is just one more new poem, and it's called For My Friend Who Is Tired of Children in Poems. True story. For my friend who is tired of children in poems. I also tire of children in poems, and of children off the page as well. I turn from a line's easy awe to endless demands, sticky hands at my hem. My teacher wrote Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, then dripped honey on top. Let the pupils lick the letters. The line's low buzz metabolizes slowly in the body. Friend, no one is looking. Bend your head and taste. Can I call you baby? Can I call you honey? Only here on a page white as any side of a cube of refined sugar? These are just words. Blame me, but it's in my blood to love this way. I make a study of it. What luxury. Together, let's be sick of the sweetness of this world. Thank you.
Dora, thank you so much. And such a pleasure to have you here. And I apologize for kind of getting lost in the bio. But it's such really a pleasure. And I'm so glad that you and Gabriella now are going to be reading from your translation. So I will let you go ahead and give it some context and talk a little bit about the poet that you translated.
Thank you so much. So I'll just say that the poet's name is Giovanna Cristina Vivinetto, and Gabriella, if you'd be kind enough to share her bio with us. We sort of dove into her first book, and then we've also been translating some of her poems elsewhere. But Gabriella.
Thank you, Dora, and thank you for that beautiful reading. Giovanna Cristina Vivinetto was born in Sicily in 1994. She currently lives in Rome, where she graduated from Sapienza University with a degree in modern philology. Dolore Minimo, or Minimal Pain, published in 2018, is her first book, and it's the first collection of Italian poetry to address the subject of transgender identity. The book was featured in Italy's major newspapers and won several prizes, including the Viareggio Opera Prima in 2019 for Best Debut. In February 2020, Giovanna published her second book of poems, Dove non siamo stati, or Where We Have Not Been.
The hands were the first loss. The innocent touch left me, touch that had explored things, discovered them in the manner of a child, shaped them. They were hands that didn't know retreat, 12-year-old child's hands that tend to a cone of light, that don't yet know how to join in prayer. Fathomless hands, like lakes in which no one would come looking. Silent hands, like ancient caskets closed. Clean hands.
The hands were the first discovery. My touch became an adult's touch, which knows exactly where to land. The ample, concave hands of a mother who arrives at the threshold and waits. Hands of cherry wood and blossom. Hands reborn. Hands that know how to close around the exact consistency of nothing.
The light was the second loss. Affliction took away the sight of fields dazzled by sun, the burnt and living plot, Sicilian coastline of my 13 years. I spent those years between lines of clothes devoured by sunlight and crumbling terracotta pots where stems of basil and lavender climbed toward the line of the sky, almost reaching to touch it. Light was everything.
The light was the second discovery. Not the light that ignites the terraces and weathers the lines of the coast, but the light of houses at dusk, light that mixes with shadow, that sifts through the lace of interlocking branches, that lifts after a storm, after an illness. I mastered the undiluted light of pure bodies, of perennial springs whose source no one knows.
And there's a third in this series. We were thinking maybe we'd read the Italian of one, just so you can hear the kind of sounds in Italian before we read that last one.
Dora, I actually unfortunately don't have the Italian in front of me right now, so perhaps we can just read the English.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's read the third one. Sorry, I thought we would read some Italian. Let's go right ahead. Forgiveness was the third loss. I wanted to excuse myself for the tone I took to your incomprehension. How rare my kindness at 14 when you spoke to me with ignorance. But the fault was no one's, not yours when you pointed to my body and said to be careful, that it wouldn't be easy. Not mine when I failed to forgive your mother reach between skin and nerves to root out uncertainties, doubts I did not yet have.
Forgiveness was the third discovery. When I was big enough to understand what it meant to be a mother, a pardon swelled and overcame me. For you, for other women, children like me, and for myself. I had held the red thread of childhood, and from one day to the next, held it no longer.
Oh, that was incredible. Could you drop the name of the Italian author into the chat for us? One of you, when you have a chance. Thank you so much. That was really beautiful, both of you. Dora, thank you for sharing that. Those poems, really incredible. I did put the links for both of the books that you read from in the chat, and I'll put them back up at the end as well. So I'm delighted to introduce our next author, Rachel Swearingen. And she is the author of How to Walk on Water and Other Stories, which was the winner of the 2018 New American Press Fiction Prize. Her stories and essays have appeared in Vice, the Missouri Review, the Kenyon Review, Off Assignment, Agni, American Short Fiction, and elsewhere. She is the recipient of the 2015 Missouri Review Jeffrey E. Smith Editor's Prize in Fiction and a 2012 Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award and the 2011 Mississippi Review Prize in Fiction. In 2019, she was named one of the 30 writers to watch by the Guild Literary Complex here in Chicago, and she holds a BA from UW-Madison and a PhD from Western Michigan University. And she teaches at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Betsy. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight, and Gabriella and Dora, that was just amazing and really wonderful readings. Thank you. And thank you to Natalia and Ignatius too. I thought tonight I would read something that's a little new. I wrote something just before the pandemic got underway, and it takes place on the L. And I haven't been on the L in a year, and I've been really missing it and just missing being out in the world. So I thought I would read this little piece, and it's called Little Free Library. Angela might have chosen a different car that evening, one that wasn't painted shiny green, that wasn't part of an advertisement campaign, but the L was packed. It was like stepping into a diorama at the Field Museum. The inside of the car covered floor to ceiling with contact paper of leaves and vines and flowers. This was in March, after months of gray weather, when it was still difficult to find a seat downtown at rush hour. She perched next to a woman whose hips were so impressive they spilled onto Angela's seat. She had seen the woman many times during her commute, always like tonight, reading a book. There was no place to rest your eyes amid all the green. The lingering smell of reefer and someone's fruity cologne didn't help. Tucked between leaves were iridescent insects, a toucan, a capuchin monkey. The car lurched forward, and then they were moving. Angela tried to glimpse the cover of the woman's paperback. She couldn't remember the last time she had read a novel herself. In her bag at her feet, she had stacks of briefs and white papers. She had been living in Chicago for less than a year, and this was her first winter. She had packed her parka away after a spell of warmer weather, and that week, after several days of blasting cold, had unpacked it again. Now she was too warm. She scrolled through the news on her phone. The reading in vehicles made her ill. Every day the headlines were more unbelievable. Her pulse beat with a dull, insistent anxiety. She dropped her phone back into her purse. All around her, people stared into screens, fidgeting. The green must have unnerved them too, because they looked around, gazed up at the fake canopy, squinted each time the evening sun broke from the clouds. Someone sneezed and a few people looked up. There was a talk of a virus overseas, a hotspot out in Washington. A little boy sat next to his mother, kicking his legs impatiently, staring up at the white lettering over the leaves, trying to sound out messages about sharing the planet. Whichever organization was behind the campaign must have chosen just one car, because Angela looked down the aisle to the next, and all was naked silver. The woman beside her glanced up from her book, and Angela tried to make conversation. "Can you imagine trying to install this?" she said. "Makes you dizzy, doesn't it? All these trees." The woman shrugged and returned to her book. Angela peeked over her arm to the words, "You wouldn't say that if you knew what I knew. You'd run away." Probably romance or intrigue. Angela preferred nonfiction. The train paused on the bridge to wait for signal clearance, and Angela gazed at skyscrapers across the river, gray water reflected on a mirrored facade. Heat pumped from the radiators, and she loosened her coat. At Merchandise Mart, a poster on the platform featured a child running toward a beach, the words "Florida awaits" in cheery lettering. People shoved aboard as sleet pelted the windows, several art students with portfolios, business people, a Hasidic man and his son, a homeless woman with a rolling cart, a group of Midwestern tourists. By the time they reached the Chicago stop, so many passengers crammed inside that two men had to press themselves into the space around Angela and the woman. The older of the two put his briefcase between his feet, braced himself with a hand against the window. From his hushed words, they might have been lawyers investigating something unsavory. "Just keep your head down," he advised the young man. "If we're not careful, this could blow up in our faces." They noticed Angela staring and stopped talking. The woman beside her turned a page and sighed. For such a large woman, her boots were high-laced and dainty. Printed on the bag under her book were cats in various colors and shapes. She probably lived alone and had a cat herself. Angela imagined her turning on a light in a small apartment, eating a frozen dinner while a tabby rubbed against her legs. She was probably lonely. When they reached Armitage, a horde of people shuffled out, and the two lawyers found seats and continued their conversation. Usually evening commutes were more hushed, but tonight, with a lurid decor, people chatted nervously. Only the woman next to Angela seemed immune. She laughed out loud at something in her book. In her bag, she had a container of gummy bears, and she reached into it, popping handfuls into her mouth before turning a page. She was voracious, and soon the plants on the walls seemed ravenous too, almost carnivorous. Spring fever. Before moving to Chicago, Angela had lived in Atlanta, and before that in San Jose, always alone. She had promised herself this time things would be different. This time she would make friends, put down roots, blossom. She gazed up at a red tropical flower, so explicit with its snaking stamen. What an insulting phrase, only applied to girls and women, to blossom, as if there were a single moment of opening to strive towards. For the past few weeks, she had itched with a desire for something to happen. Now, as she watched a man toy with something in the pocket of his jacket, she feared it would be a gun, brandished wildly. From the way a few other passengers glanced at the man, she knew they were thinking the same. She was almost angry with whoever had wallpapered the car. Too muchness, she thought. Too crowded, too hot, too many people. You could see their brains clotting with worry. She inched a little further away from the woman whose body oozed with ease, her elbows grazing Angela each time she turned a page or slipped her hand into her bag for another fistful of candy. The fake jungle reminded her of something. What was it? It came to her as they started up again after the next stop, that restaurant she had been to on a date a few weeks before she left Atlanta. The place made to look like a rainforest, only with 6-foot birds of paradise, a gurgling stream, and pumped-in sounds of rain and thunder and drums. Her date looked much older than his profile picture and had blustered on about his work. Her apartment was already packed for her move to the Midwest, so she didn't bother with disappointment. She plucked a fried ball of fish from the appetizers they had ordered and chewed. "I'm boring you," he said. And she had lied, saying, "No, it's all so interesting." And he said, "No, it's god awful, actually. And this has got to be the cheesiest restaurant in the world." She laughed. The Coconut Lounge. They made fun of the menu, the poo-poo platter with its assortment of fried food and vat of ranch dressing. They ordered boomerangs served in tiki glasses with bright umbrellas and divulged with great humor embarrassing bits of their mundane lives. The man's wife had left him, and he had 2 daughters who always needed money and a grandchild with a mysterious illness. "I thought boomerangs were from the outback, not the tropics," he said, interrupting himself with such seriousness that they howled with laughter and without even speaking of it, left together. The train paused before the next station. Then it backed up before inching forward again and stopping. Often on weekends, men in orange vests checked the tracks or took blowtorches to the rusted scaffolding. The woman next to her glanced out the window, holding the book open with the flat of her hand. Angela noticed a thick ring with a skull on it. The man she met in Atlanta would have liked to hear about the cat bag and the skull ring and the tiny boots and the gummy bears. He would have helped her make up a story about the woman. At the end of their date, they had waited outside the restaurant in the humid breeze and shared a cab to Angela's place, where they had gotten into bed amid her moving boxes. The sex had been awkward at first, but tender too, and then they had loved each other with such fury that Angela had lain awake most of the night. In the morning, the man joined her in her kitchen for coffee, and she had almost asked him to call in sick for work to stay with her for a few more days. She had the impression even then of trying to fix the moment in time, the way they sat next to each other at the breakfast bar, the space glowing between them as it does sometimes between 2 strangers who are struck by a sudden familiarity. When he left, he kissed Angela on the forehead and said, "We'll always have the Coconut Lounge." They hadn't seen each other since, but sometimes they texted. On the other end of the car, a boy rapped along loudly to a song only he could hear on his headphones. She wondered how long the CTA would run the Green campaign before the jungle had to be stripped away and sent to a landfill. One of the women she worked with liked to lecture her about local politics, how every city's rot could be traced to kickbacks and waste management, how she had heard that Chicago's recycling towered outside the city somewhere in vast plastic mountains. Next to her, the woman finished her book, snapped it shut, stuck it into her bag. They were in the neighborhoods now, brick 2 and 3 flats, rooftops with outdoor furniture still under tarps. On one roof, a dog lay chained between puddles of water. The first time she'd seen him, she hadn't realized he was there to protect the building, that there was more than one dog, that they did shifts alone on the top of these buildings in all kinds of weather, hour after hour, watching trains pass with packs of humans peering out the windows. Angela looked away as the evening sun appeared again, blinding them all for a second before ducking back under a cloud. The homeless woman banged her cart down the aisle, preaching as she went. "Come home to Jesus," she said. "He's got a big lap for you all." Two men standing near the doors slipped their hands together and inched a little closer. A young woman gazed over at a guy in her seat facing hers. Angela watched the volley of glances, wondered if they would talk or leave things to fate. Alongside the train, a drone circled. The sun broke from the clouds again, and the drone wasn't a drone at all, but two gulls, white now instead of gray, separating, swooping up and out of sight. The train stopped on an overpass and powered down. The conductor's voice came over the loudspeakers in garbled bits, something about mechanical issues and delays. "Not again," the woman beside Angela said. "Need to be somewhere?" Angela asked. And the woman looked at her this time and said, "Yeah, figures, my stop is next." "What was the book you were reading?" Angela asked, as the train rolled forward again. "Finally," the woman said, ignoring Angela's question. At the next stop, the conductor's voice crackled overhead again, and people grumbled and started to shuffle out the car. A train must have broken down somewhere further north. The woman next to Angela stood suddenly an Amazon. She had to be over 6 feet tall. Angela watched her lumber off the train. She had plenty of work to do while she waited, but the printed jungle was spooky now that the car was nearly empty. It reminded her of an abandoned planet. She stood and followed the crowd down the stairs to the turnstiles in the street. The wind whipped in from the lake. Throngs of passengers waited to board shuttles. Down the street, a ragtag group of workers striped in front of a theater next to an enormous inflated rat bound to the top of a beat-up car. The sleet had turned to drizzle, but Angela could smell garlic and grilled meat, and she had nowhere to go except home to her apartment to finish her work. She zipped her coat and walked at a good clip, and then she noticed the tall woman ahead of her, eyes on her phone, pausing now and then to look at street signs. At a little free library stand, she stopped to place her book inside. The woman must have sensed Angela behind her. She looked a little frightened when she looked back at Angela, who took her phone from her bag and pretended to study a map. When the woman finally walked away, Angela went to the little free library. The box was crammed with books, the hinges worn from the door being thrown to the wind, the latch loose. There were several paperback novels about the right size, a legal thriller, a novel of international intrigue, a memoir about war and love and exile. None of them fit the image she had of the woman. None of them pulsed with a secret message, just a story just for her. What she wanted was a fortune teller, but what she found was a how-to on Sudoku, a book on decluttering, several Amish romances written by a woman from Milwaukee, a Clive Cussler, a recipe book for multiple courses baked in bundt pans, and a guide to US citizenship. She shoved the 3 novels into her already bulging bag and headed back to the train. If it were running again, she might end up in a different car, one that looked like all the others. There would be a backup of passengers and she'd have to stand in the aisle in her heels. Worse, she'd eventually go home to eat takeout alone, to get into bed with her laptop. She'd try to distill her white papers into action items and theories of change. She'd send emails, saving some for just after midnight, to show her coworkers how overworked she was to be sending emails so late. She ducked into a Thai restaurant with empty tables and sat near the window. She ordered a Mai Tai and a green curry to take home. The waiter stood behind the counter watching a funny video on his phone and chuckling. She took out her own phone and texted a photo of her drink to the man she had dated in Atlanta. "Only thing that's missing is a poo-poo platter," she wrote. The man was already typing a reply. She watched the dots swim back and forth as he typed and erased and retyped, then nothing. Then minutes later, a thumbs up. The days were getting longer, but outside it was dark, and she could see her reflection in the window. She considered adopting a cat, maybe 2, so it had company when she was at work. The waiter brought her meal in a bag along with her check. Soon it would be spring. The trees had buds on them, and on her way to work that morning, she could feel the leaves trying to unfurl from their encasements of scales and ice. She had 3 books she could read in bed. She could stop at the corner store and buy some wine. She could call in sick tomorrow. She wouldn't be lying, not entirely. There was something pressing in on her from all sides that she couldn't identify, some dull urgency coming to her from the outer reaches of the world. She would read each book, tuck messages into them, and put them back into the little free library for people passing through the city on their way to the train. She opened her takeout bag and started to eat, the steam fogging her glasses. She was in Chicago, eating spicy fish steamed in coconut milk, in a wrapping of banana leaves, inside a styrofoam carton that would sit in a landfill long past her own time on Earth. She thought of the notes she would leave in the books, her secret society of the lonely. She wanted to believe that such gestures mattered. She wanted to believe that they were all hurtling through space in the same capsule, that everyone was trying to tell someone something before it was too late. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. That was incredible, as always, from you. Thank you. That was great. So we are coming to the last reader of the evening. So I'm pleased to introduce John McCarthy, who is the author of Scared Violent Like Horses, which won the Jake Adam York Prize, and also Ghost County. His poems have appeared in 32 Poems, Alaska Quarterly Review, Best New Poets 2015, Copper Nickel, Hayden's Fairy Review, The Journal, Tri-Quarterly, and others. He is the winner of the Pinch Literary Award in Poetry in 2016. He has an MFA from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and he is an associate editor of Rhino. He currently lives in Evanston, Illinois. Please welcome, Ignatius and I also live in Evanston. So please welcome John, our final reader of the evening.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Betsy. And thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Ignatius, for making this space and putting it all together. Gabriella, Dora, Rachel, thank you. I feel lifted after hearing you all read just wonderful, beautiful, incredible work. I feel like it's a good way to end the weekend grounded in art. So thank you all for coming. I'll begin with the title poem from Scared Violent Like Horses. The poem and the book rather seeks to interrogate the relationship between grief and toxic masculinity at the intersection of class, and how sometimes its effects are passed down as familial inheritance. So, Scared Violent Like Horses. I was too young to call him a friend, but I had a classmate once who snuck up behind a horse, and now his body is made of a long time ago. He is the quiet space in my memory where he never sat next to me again. Back then, everyone I ever called a friend held fire in their fists when they talked to me. Their fists were dingy, grime-covered, and grease-slick, as if they were made of horsehair, as if they were untamed and lonely, galloping and wind-swollen. We didn't know how to talk about loss, so we made each other lose. We went to fields to see who could take the most damage. We went to fields that smelled like the boy who became an empty space on a Tuesday morning a long time ago. Now, because I am scared of time and how it moves, I look down at my fists that didn't always want to, but have hit so many friends that the broken knuckles look like bruised magnolias. Listen to me, please. When I knock or bang on the table or door and beg for attention, please. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness. I don't know how to let anything go. I don't know how to say anything else about the boy who had a buzz cut and a flat head, the boy who was kicked in the face by a horse and died looking up at the sky. The boy's father must have found his son with a crushed face, and while running back to the house with his own son in his arms, must have said something raging and spiteful to God. This memory is my starting point when I think backward and apologize for all of our fists coiled tight as key rings. How could we not break the mirror we look at in the morning? How could we not swing at the different versions of our faces staring back between the fissures? The hurt and mangled parts of us loved the blood-dried brown on our skewbald knuckles, and we had nightmares of being reined in. We needed someone to help us change. We needed someone to force us into confronting the uselessness of our violence. But no one came, and our fists swelled unbridled and restless, wild and afraid. The next poem that I will read, thank you, from the collection is a meditation on time, and it sort of serves as a premonition in a way for many of the things that follow in the book. It is called Noise Falling Backward. I've been told not to come here, to this tool shed of memory, where everything is as old as it is useless. Inside, a scoop of millet seed balances on a mulch sack. There are garbage bags full of crushed natural light cans exhaling. Trespassing, I feel like everything is a discovery. The open slat window, the salt licks meant for nesting in the laps of tree stumps, the way the dust meanders through the light like a premonition. Outside, mare's tail clouds run wild and smear the sky orange at the end of a long day. And a hummingbird feeder hangs from the mulberry. No one has come for me yet. Silence is just noise falling backward from the future, and I don't know what to do with it. I haven't lived through it yet. It's like wiping my eyes in the rain. I can't see clearly. I can't get a grip on anything. Alone here, I linger and thumb the empty hole of a shotgun shell. There are more long days ahead. For now, everything is quiet and mutable. I wish the present could stay like this, in its place and hidden. Thank you. So I'll read a few new poems from a manuscript that's in progress. And so I'll read what is tentatively the title poem from the new manuscript. It is called This Brutal Vanishing, and it is addressed to a friend who is no longer with us. This Brutal Vanishing. 1. Dear Jeremy, let me say how the arms I used to hold out to you became wild rye, windflower, copper-shouldered sedge reaching for the obese and confident son of Illinois. They became sawtooth, sunflower, aster, and coneflower, growing stiff and erect and lolling with the wind. They became every other flower and all of the light. I wish I could tell you how everything I wanted to say to you was like a jar full of lightning bugs that a child caught and took to the cellar and forgot. I suppose that's how desire wanes. 2. Dear This Brutal Vanishing. Somewhere, a hunter is setting up his hunting blind. He pulls cockleburs off his jeans. The hunter kneels, and his breath is like a boiling pot of water thrown into the air. The air is a double-digit degree in the negative. He takes aim, inhales, exhales, and shoots. The deer is a beautiful animal, Jeremy, but the shot buck is a sacrifice too many will not understand. The hunter hoists its body onto a hook in the field. He takes his carving knife and starts with the rectum. He pulls the skin away, bright muscles that once twitched like wildflowers. The hunter hacks the legs off at the knee, chucking shin and hoof into a bucket like broken hammers. 3. Deer driving 2 lanes in a whiteout. Most days, I'm one bad feeling away from turning into winter, from becoming the frozen ground yearning for the thaw in spring. I have no control over this feeling, especially when I'm between Murfreesboro and Springfield, white knuckling the steering wheel, changing what I believe in so I may be delivered home safely. It's a relief arriving at the driveway slope. It feels good to kick my boots against the doorstep, sloughing the snow. I drive so much for work, returning home feels like a season, familiar and fledgling. And what I love is always this close to coming back to life. 4. Deer tornado wrecked and still thirsty. These fields exhaust themselves out to the horizon and boil over with thunder. These new storms bend a town into hopelessness. I've seen hopelessness fall down a dry well so deep it became a new kind of hope. It was like resilience, but more rabid and bloodshot. Perched at the tavern, trying to enhance that hope, I've been thinking that same fever dream I've had since 7th grade, where maybe if I stay up all night and make it that late, everything I can't articulate will come back to me. Yes, that includes you, Jeremy. It includes the ox eyes, the foxgloves, the tick seed, plants that look like prayers. Every prayer I've ever said has fallen apart, has withered like this town's population and every town's population around here. 5. Dear the memory I keep inventing an image for. The door of the tractor hangs open and the leather seat is slashed open like a dead animal. The gear shift is a flagless pole made of peeling rust. This is where you went to sleep, Jeremy. I didn't find you, but I keep finding you here. In this memory that opens me up wider every time I recall it. The hole is so large now the sun pours in and makes everything hot. I can't handle it. Here, a burnt spoon, a needle, the bicep knot I watched you make a dozen times, the purple vein your girlfriend traced with her fingernail, and this is where it gets dark. Your head drops and gives way to the body's gravity. The wind passes through your open mouth, tries to take the light in, but takes too much. Black-eyed Susans, purple weeds color the spot like bruises. 6. Dear this bruised landscape. Oil tank batteries litter the 2 lanes between I-70 and I-64 like abandoned gravestones. Their gravel lot makes of them a scrap metal peninsula. There are nights where boys climb the catwalks of the oil tank batteries and the stair railings shake like a rope pulled too taut. These boys have forgotten that they are full of light because they are full of smoke. Tonight, they are a chorus of trespassing and dare, a harmony of chucked bottles. Their futures have not yet sieged this fortress of fly-dumped box springs scattering the runoff ditches and furrows of switchgrass. I usually drive by so fast. I only notice the tipped over trailers, not the big blue stem, little blue stem, or the stiff goldenrod waving, maybe reaching. 7. Dear the desperation from which the desperate still prey. Outside of Chicago, the rest of Illinois is a belief, a kind of faith. People either believe it exists or they don't. I hope it's there for your sake, Jeremy, but I believe you live inside of an invisible place inside of an invisible place. I have the desire to fall in love with sleep like you did and stay inside my house forever. It's winter and I desire everyone I have ever loved to be in one large open room. Their footprints like feelings stomping through my body. Jeremy, you are all these people running through me. Every time I think of you, it's to remind myself that you have to leave again. It's natural. Leaving happens every day. Every day it happens again. May everything happen every day, again and again, maybe next time with joy. So I'll read 2 more short poems. So this poem is called A Baud, and I wrote it before a tree branch actually broke off and crushed the back part of our house. So I guess I manifested that disaster in a way, but it's a nice poem. A Baud. When the tree fell on the roof of our bedroom last winter, under its own iced weight and dead bark riddled by pine beetles and fat squirrels burrowing trunk-lost branches to stay warm, we were hiding under electric-laden blankets. You were asleep with a cold and dreaming from a shot of NyQuil, and I was enjoying an imaginary conversation with you inside my uncovered head, while rasping frost attached itself like ivy to the window stuck open from dried paint, its tracks filled with dead leaves and insect shells. The razored wind drafted in like an idling car engine. That's how the workday begins. Unable to afford to fix the roof properly, Y-shaped cracks split our walls, reaching upward like arms, straining to stop the ceiling from caving. How easy it would be to let it, but that's the distinct tragic thing about 2 bodies lying in a bed together. We have to get up and leave each other daily to keep this chipped paint and exposed drywall, these things we need. And I will close with 1 more poem from the new manuscript. It is called Same Old Story. All the names spray painted at the base of the abandoned silo, they weren't ours. It was harvest season, and beneath the sky, the tenor of fall sounded like rocks thrown at its side, a dirge. There was a hitch in your step as we walked through the wheatgrass, looking for a spot to be alone. The wind was picking up like it always does when telling this story, and it felt like having a flat tire on the side of a dirt road a long way from anywhere. In those moments, I know exactly what I want or what I don't want, one or the other. There's nothing to do around here, you said. I nodded, but I'm not really sure what I meant by nodding. We listened to a weather vane sway. It sounded like rust, or it was a gate, opening and closing, slamming its lift latch. I didn't know you smoked, but you stubbed a cigarette out in the dirt and flicked it away. I was spinning a pine cone in my hands. You know how it goes. It felt familiar, then it changed. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was quite wonderful. Thank you, Dora, Gabriella, Rachel, and John for your incredible work and lovely reading. Let's give them a round of applause, everyone. Thank you. Before we move to the Q&A, I just want to make a couple of announcements. Our next reading will take place on Sunday, March 28th, featuring Patty McNair, Elizabeth McKenzie, Susan Cloris, and Mike Zapata. So please mark your calendars, and we hope to see you then. And that would be March 28th. As well, author Sarah Connell and I will be hosting a free submission workshop via Zoom on Saturday, March 27th from 11 to 1 p.m. That's open to the public, but Zoom registration is required. For more information, please click the Facebook link that I'm putting in the chat for you now, and we hope to see you there as well. Let me just do that now. And that is a tiny URL link. I'm going to put the long link just in case there are problems with that first one. Good luck with the long one. Okay, so